Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out Neuroshima Hex. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that guy's name, I'm sorry, but it's right there on the box, you can have a look for yourself. This is a tactics game that I picked up entirely on a whim. I just saw it on an Australian board game website, and I thought to myself, you know what, that looks pretty good. I was right. I was damn well right, because this game is excellent. This strategy is fantastic, and I just need to walk you through a few of the game's basic mechanics so I can explain why. So, we're currently in the middle of a war between Moloch on the left and the Outpost on the right. Moloch is mainly focused on turtling and defense. As you can see here, they're trying to crowd around their HQ here. HQs are important. If they get attacked, you lose life points. The person who's got the lowest at the end of the game is the loser. You can wipe out HQs, but it doesn't really happen in two-player games, but I'll get to that in a bit. So, at the start of any one particular turn, in this case it's Moloch's, he takes 3 tiles from his pile, and he chooses what 2 he wants to hang on to for the turn, which one he wants to discard, and they've all got some very unique uses. So, let's go through the units, just to start off with. This is a unit. It has attacks on certain edges of the hex. It also has the ability Toughness, and it also has an initiative number. This initiative number is when they'll go when the initiative counter is counting down. And the way this game works is as long as there's an empty space, you can put down a unit there, and it can be facing any way you want. So he could put it down here, for example, to try and cover some of the firing lines close to the base. Not to mention that he's got a bit of cover here from this guy, so he'll still be able to shoot through his friend, although that friend won't technically be there at that point in the battle, and kill this guy. Or, he could come up here. It'd be a risky play. He's got nothing backing him up, and something there could easily take him out before he's got the chance to respond. But he's got a firing line on both of the edges of the Outpost's main forces here. So there's always a little bit of a tactical decision to be made, especially when the board is completely empty, and there are many possibilities, because you shuffle this deck and you get these different tiles every time, so the battlefield is always going to turn out different every single time. Then you've got modules, which provide benefits to anything those lines are connecting to. So it would be, let's actually turn this to a way that it would actually be connecting to people. It would be providing some extra ranged attack to this unit and this unit. This unit doesn't actually have any ranged attack because it's a net fighter, therefore it's mainly meant around disabling these two. But this guy is definitely going to get that bonus, and this guy is also going to get a secondary ranged bonus because he's next to his HQ. So his positioning here is great because he's firing some massively strong shots down this way. Whether or not he'll live long enough to make that happen, I don't know, but he's also got an initiative boost connected to him. And up here, we've also got a ranged and a melee boost connected to these two who also don't have them. So it was mainly put down there by the Moloch player as a sort of defensive wall against this thing. Because those 2 attacks plus the extra one, I don't think it gets the extra one. It doesn't count for initiative 0. But man, if there was like an initiative 3 just firing down there constantly, it would be a rough survivability for anything in that line. So modules also work the same way as units as they go down the board. Instant actions, however, don't work the same way. They are used and then are immediately discarded. This one in this example is pushback. So he could pick a unit and say, hey, I don't want that guy to be there anymore. Move him back a space, please. The player controlling it would get the choice if there was more than one space it could be pushed back to. It was adjacent to in terms of an empty space. And there are multiple of these. So you've got the ability to move, for example, right here on top of the Outpost's discard pile. You have the ability to snipe out certain units, depending on your faction. For Moloch, it's an airstrike, which can take out a massive range of hexes. Or, the most important one, the battle. The battle will cause a battle to start, in which the initiatives will start from the highest and move down to the lowest. Everything on an initiative level will act at exactly the same time, so they'll all fire at each other. So if initiative 3 was facing against an initiative 3, they would both immediately die. And it would slowly come down, taking into account all of the modules, all of the special abilities from something like a HQ or a module or what have you, until you get down to initiative 0, at which point all of the HQs act out and hit everything around them. And then play begins anew with a newly emptied board and a new room for trying to get more hits on the HQs. And frankly, I think it's brilliant. In 2-player, it is some absolutely sublime strategy, because it really does turn into, I have a plan, okay, I'm going to disrupt that plan, I have outsmarted your disrupting, I have outsmarted your outsmarting of my outsmarting of my disrupting. It will just go on and on ad infinitum, just bouncing back and forth like that. But frankly, it turns out to be brilliant, because there are so many ways and so many strategies you can pull off with the units you have available to you, and every battle turns out completely differently, and the intensity slowly rises as the board fills up. Because if the whole board fills up, a battle starts right away. So it slowly builds up. All of these strategies start getting thrown out the window, and everyone's just trying to make sense of the chaos. But at the same time, since you can drop in units anywhere and face them in any direction, there's almost always a way for you to come back from something, or to punch a perfectly placed hole in the enemy's plans. So the Outpost started off trying to get firing lines in on, I believe it was down here. But then this armored unit came out and was like, I'm not going to let you do that. So this melee unit came along and tried to hit it from the side, but unfortunately was forced to move back after this guy came along and started firing away. Then the Moloch player was like, hey, I'm going to put this down here. So now this guy's just stuck in here doing that. Meanwhile, there were some more firing lines coming along up here, but this net unit came along and was like, hey, I'm going to stop you two from moving so that you guys can't get good shots in on my HQ on my back line. These two up here are currently, let's just say, unmolested, but it's not like that can't change, right? And there are so many stories of this, which just started out with simple plans that did not survive contact with the enemy. And it happens every single time, and it is a fantastic brain burner, because due to the fact that you can only draw 3 tiles, and they can all have some really nice abilities. Like, let's just discard this medic tile, for example. So you got this guy here, who could fire in 3 different directions. You got this guy here, who has melee in 2 directions, has a toughness, but can also explode, dealing damage to everything around him. And then you got this guy here, who can fire 2 shots every turn. You have to make the rough decisions. You have to think ahead to what the opponent's going to do. You have to think to yourself, how the hell am I going to get myself out of this situation? And again, all of your original plans start building up on this board here, and then they all start falling apart as the entire thing gets full, and you're trying to make the best use out of everything that you've got. And you realize that you've got no way to protect your base from that shot that's coming in, and then imagine that I'm snapping my fingers, because I can't actually snap my fingers. The board fills, or a battle tile goes down, and then it starts resolving. And admittedly, the battles are kind of the most annoying bit about this game, which is why a digital implementation would be great. There is one on Android, but I don't think there's one on PC, where you start from the top and you work your way down. But because you have to integrate all of the modules, all of the special abilities from HQs and all that into the calculations, you have to look at the board very carefully and make sure that everything is done correctly. But once you do, you'll spend a few minutes flipping over tiles to just indicate that they're dead, doing all of your attacks and all that, and then everything will clear up, and then you can get back to raising the tension up again. That'll happen 2 or 3 times in a 2-player game, and it is immensely satisfying when you manage to get just the right unit in just the right spot, whether it be because you decided to hold on to something that can shoot in 3 directions for the entire game, or because you got 2 units that were absolutely perfect off the drop of the tile deck, and then just put them both down, and then you got a battle next turn, or you just played out your strategy perfectly. You used your abilities as a particular faction to the absolute maximum, and all 4 of these factions are actually incredibly different. So the best thing you have for this is actually these wonderful little reference cards that they give you in the box here, because these reference cards give you a bit of background as to what actually happens with this faction in the world of Neuroshima, but it also gives you advice as to how to use your deck, and tactical advice as to what to actually do with the units that you get. And it makes jumping into this game really simple, and it does a really good job at highlighting the differences between the 4 different factions you get in the box. So you've got the Outpost, who again are mainly focused on maneuverability and firepower, because the more of these guys that are attached to their HQ, the more shots they're going to get downrange, and the more they're just going to be able to go bang, 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 let's wipe out their entire existence. Whoops, that's the wrong one. So, and the other one we were talking about, of course, was Moloch. Good old Moloch. Big robot bastards. Their best tactic is to hide in a corner and surround themselves with as many strong units as possible, which is why they've got this guy like dead center right in front of the HQ here, who is not only able to take 3 hits before dying, but has some kind of armor towards range shots coming in. And of course, like a net fighter here who can disable a massive amount of a potential enemy's offensive forces. But the other two that they include in the box are just as different. So if we go on to the third, which is the Borgo, the Borgo are actually really interesting because they've got an absolute ton of melee units and their HQ is designed around making them move faster. So they plop down a bunch of units around their HQ and suddenly they're hitting before everyone else and they're hitting everything in a massive circle. So you've got very little room here. And again, that's another reason why the strategy is really good in this game, even at 2 players, because it might look big. It's like, how many tiles is that? 8, 13, 40, 19 tiles, but that disappears really quick, even in a 2-player game. So you're always finding yourself fighting for room. And when you've got the Borgo, who managed to drop their HQ dead center in the middle, surround themselves with melee units, and just fling off melee attacks at literally everything before anything else can respond, completely clearing the board. Oh, so satisfying. Oh, so good. And then you've got the Hegemony, the 4th faction, who have a lot of net fighters, who have a fair amount of variety, and they've just got a fair amount of just balance to them in terms of the strategies that they can take on. And it's really helped out by the fact that on the backside of all of these cards is a full-on reference to their entire deck. So you've got, excuse the bump of the camera there and the sudden white balance change, but you've got a full list of what they've got, and this can even like infer to you what their tactics might be. So again, this guy's got a ton of melee units in the form of mutants and claws, and all friendly adjacent units +1 initiative. So it gives you an idea of what you need to do with it. The Outpost here, tons of commandos, a couple of annihilators, and a few of their modules that are really focused on that. So they've got tons of ranged attack and plenty of battles and moves. So they're designed to be mobile, they're designed to fire off as many shots as possible, and it makes their strategy easier to understand. Same thing here with Moloch, because Moloch has an absolute ton of really strong dudes, but they don't have much in the way of battles and moves, but they do have a lot of pushbacks. So they really do want to be turtling in the back corner here, using as many of those pushbacks as possible to keep anything they can away from them. And so it makes the game really easy to learn, because all you need to do is hand that card to someone and say, hey, read this, you'll get a better idea of what you're meant to be doing, and they actually will stand a chance. All of the armies are really damn well balanced though. I've never felt like any of the 4 armies in the base box would be incapable of taking out any other army. Although a better player will absolutely have a better chance of that, because I have been playing this with a friend of mine and he's been wiping the floor with me every single time we get the game out, no matter what army he's been using. So trust me, there is balance there, but you still need to be pretty good at the game. They also include a couple of other things worthy of note. So you've got these little weird tokens here, of which strangely enough they give you 2 of each, which seems unnecessary considering these are meant for just keeping track of the health on your board, and there's never going to be more than 1 copy of this army, because you only get these 4 armies in the base box. But you also get these little dials here that let you turn them up and down in order to actually keep your health, but I mean, why bother? Just use these. Just save space. You also get Hex Puzzles. There's 55 of them, and they're basically just solo puzzles that you can use in order to brush up your skills, but they aren't anywhere near as good as playing against a human opponent. And there are 4 armies I should say, in the base box. So does the game support 4 players? Yes. I have played with 3 players and 4 players, and it's definitely not the same amount of strategy as in the 2-player game. The 2-player game is a sort of think 10 moves ahead, make sure that you are outsmarting, they're outsmarting every single time, and it just becomes this sublime build-up of tension as the board gets filled with all of these different plans and all of these different intricacies every single time. But when you've got 3 and 4 players, which are all inside the 19 hexes, there is so little room to maneuver that it basically turns into manipulate the chaos in your favor. Because there's really no other way to do it. Whether it be trying to convince the other players that someone else might be a better target, trying to make use of what you have against going up against multiple armies. Again, it's more chaos than it is strategy, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't bloody fun.
And considering that you have multiple attacks coming in from multiple places, it turns player elimination into something that barely happens in the 2-player game into a real threat in 3 and 4 players. And it just makes you wonder, is it going to be worth the effort to focus on one player so that I've got a clearer board to take out the other 2? So in a way, it even adds more strategy that the 2-player game doesn't, even though it's clearly not still equal.
And of course, the game's got an absolute ton of expansion armies. There's something like over a dozen. And I'd love to get my hands on some of them, but it seems to be impossible to actually buy them where I live, because, great, thank you very much. I mean, I could go on Amazon and order a couple of them, but I'm not going to be able to get all of them. And when you've got a game like this, which has 16 bloody armies to collect, you're not going to be able to get all of them. That's really annoying. But anyway, yes. So, is there anything else I have to say about it? Not really. As a 2-player game, it's absolutely sublime. The strategy of the different units and the way that they work, being able to merge them all together with HQ powers and modules, and sliding them all into unique strategies which immediately fumble when someone puts a gunner behind just so that you need to worry about that. Or they set up some firing lines around the outside so you have to worry about them. Or any other amount of really cool strategies that make every army feel completely different and burn your brain into how you can really effectively use all of the pieces that are given to you. Needing to choose what to discard and what to keep, needing to decide whether or not you want to put this out this turn or wait for a better situation after a battle or something along those lines. It's all sublime strategy, and it works on really simple rules, which is really only let down by the fact that battles feel kind of anticlimactic because you have to spend so much time resolving them and making sure you get it done properly. I'm sure you'll get better at it as you get more familiar with the game, but I just gotta say, it can be a bit of just a little bit of a letdown. Like, it's got this absolutely fantastic build-up as the board fills, as all these strategies start coming together, and then you just gotta be like, right, time to do 5 minutes of trying to figure out what does what and when. It's not that bad, but it can be a little bit, you know, take a bit of the spin out of your wheels. 3-player and 4-player games, absolute chaos, but still fun in their own way. Trying to negotiate with the enemy to attack someone else because they might be a bigger threat. Trying to make do with what you've got against 2 or more enemies in this absolutely tiny space where every single fight turns into a melee ranged bonanza and there's a battle every couple of turns and people can actually get eliminated off the board. It's a different kind of strategy, but it's also really good at that too. And thanks to the fact that the 4 armies they include in the box are also different and handle as differently as they do, means that there is an absolute ton of replayability, variety, and strategy that can be found within this. Well, it's not exactly a tiny box, but it's a relatively small box for the amount of strategy that's in there. You'd expect this to be the size of the bloody cabinets I've got behind me. Like, that's the lid right there. There's a hand for scale. But yeah, the strategy is sublime. No matter whether you're playing it in 2-player or 3 or 4-player, although it's more chaotic when you get into 3 or 4-player, the armies are really varied, and it's a simple game, but they do everything they need to help you get into it nice and easily with these really nice cards. They do give you some form of solo content, although I wouldn't play it with this, and I don't know how you would possibly put solo into this game without absolutely breaking what strategy there is, but it's really damn good. It is an instant recommend to anyone who's asking for a tactics strategy game that will turn their brain into mush and have them come up with these absolutely grandiose strategies and these fantastic counterplays that will just bounce back and forth off each other and create this really intense and really enjoyable game of putting hexes on a board and making sure they're facing in the right direction. That's pretty much all I've got to say. This has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.